This is the Cold War, year by year. A digest of the events of America's longest conflict. Chapter 6, 1950.
Drop whatever you're doing. Find the nearest hole and make like a mole. A subway's okay. Stay out of flimsy buildings. They give bad protection. A basement's fine, preferably under a solid, well-constructed building. And the safest positions are near strong supporting columns or next to the walls, protected from falling bricks and 2x4s.
The 1950s dawned on a world that was poised on the brink. The Soviet Union's successful test of an atomic bomb in the previous year had come earlier than expected. The specter of an atomic attack was now looming over everyday life in the United States. This sparked heated debates within the government, the military, and the scientific community regarding the imperative to advance the development of more sophisticated nuclear weaponry. Despite objections about the morality of such an undertaking from many, including the so-called father of the atomic bomb, Robert Oppenheimer, President Truman announced the beginning of the development of a hydrogen bomb, the H-bomb, on January 31st, 1950. At the end of World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union liberated the East Asian nation of Korea from defeated Japan. They divided it along a particular latitude, the 38th parallel, creating two zones of occupation, as had been agreed at the Potsdam Conference of July 1945. The Soviets were to administer the northern zone. The Americans were to administer the southern zone.
$1 million worth of food, clothing, and medical supplies for Korea is loaded aboard the relief ship Hawaiian Bear. Donated by individuals and organizations in nearly every state of the Union to the American Korean Foundation, the goods are loaded after a dockside ceremony in which Nina Warren, daughter of Chief Justice Warren, and Korean Ambassador Yoo Chong-young take part.
In 1948, the occupation zones had become two sovereign states, similar to the situation in Europe with East and West Germany. A communist state, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, was established in the north under the government led by Premier Kim Il-sung, while a capitalist state, the Republic of Korea, was established in the south under the government led by President Syngman Rhee. Both governments claimed to be the sole legitimate government of all of Korea, and neither accepted the border as permanent. Tensions between the two nations rose until, on June 25, 1950, North Korea, in a surprise attack, invaded South Korea. The Korean War had begun. That same day, the United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 82, condemning the invasion. Shortly thereafter, President Truman spoke to the nation about the Korean situation through both radio and the emerging technology of television.
On Sunday, June 25th, Communist forces attacked the Republic of Korea. This attack has made it clear beyond all doubt that the international communist movement is willing to use armed invasion to conquer independent nations. An act of aggression such as this, it creates a very real danger to the security of all free nations. The communist invasion was launched in great force with planes, tanks, and artillery. The size of the attack and the speed with which it was followed up make it perfectly plain that it had been plotted long in advance. 52 of the 59 countries which are members of the United Nations have given their support to the action taken by the Security Council to restore peace in Korea. Under the flag of the United Nations, a unified command has been established for all forces of the members of the United Nations fighting in Korea. General Douglas MacArthur is the commander of this combined force. The prompt action of the United Nations to put down lawless aggression and the prompt response to this action by free peoples all over the world will stand as a landmark in mankind's long search for a rule of law among nations. We know that it'll take a hard, tough fight to halt the invasion, to drive the communists back. The invaders have been provided with enough equipment and supplies for a long campaign. They overwhelmed the lightly armed defense forces of the Korean Republic in the first days and drove southward. These and other reports I've received show that our armed forces are acting with close teamwork and efficiency.
While the UN forces were made up mainly of troops from the United States, a number of member nations sent forces to Korea to enforce the UN resolution. They included the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, Turkey, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, Greece, Ethiopia, Thailand, the Philippines, and Colombia. On July 4, 1950, the United Nations engaged North Korean forces for the first time in Osan. They failed to halt the North Korean advance and fall back toward the South Korean capital city of Seoul. On September 15th, UN forces led by General Douglas MacArthur, comprised of U.S. Marines and South Korean troops, successfully landed behind enemy lines at the South Korean port of Incheon, exploiting the element of surprise. MacArthur's leadership and brilliant strategic vision in the operation was praised as one of the defining moments in the war. But despite its success, subsequent decisions would lead to tensions with the Truman administration. After a successful landing, UN forces press inland and cut off the invading North Korean army from their base of supply.
War is a wanton destroyer of property and lives. This shattered body, this burning hut, are tragic symbols of the havoc war creates. Even men of goodwill must fight fire with fire, must kill and destroy to bring a swift end to death and destruction. Their comrades in arms, prisoners of the communists, shot with their hands tied behind their backs near Wegwan. This was Daejeon when our counterattacking forces breaking out of their Pusan bridgehead retook the town, what there was of it. Daejeon was razed, leveled, for Manila or Warsaw. These men, women, and children were not killed accidentally in the heat of battle. They were murdered, cold-bloodedly, deliberately. butchered to spread terror. To warn the
By late September, UN forces had advanced far inland and recaptured the South Korean capital of Seoul.
The horror of Daejeon was only a pale reflection of Seoul, where a great city, the heart of a nation, was ravaged. Brilliant leadership and the hammer blows of a great fighting team, the Navy, Air Force, Army, and Marines, working with other United Nations forces, had snapped the spine of the North Korean aggressor. The enemy was paralyzed.
The North Korean army is forced to retreat and suffers a crippling series of defeats as they fall back.
On 20 October, United Nations troops had seemingly sent the bulk of the communist forces fleeing in defeat toward the Manchurian border, 100 miles to the north.
In October, United Nations forces crossed the 38th parallel for the first time since hostilities began.
U.S., British, and South Korean troops are pursuing the disintegrating communist forces. By 27 October, South Korean troops have reached the Manchurian border on the Yellow River near Chosan, and other UN forces have advanced against virtually no opposition. But on the same day, a sudden, unforeseen factor changes the entire course of the war. Chinese communist troops cross the Manchurian border and help the North Korean Reds drive back UN forces.
As UN forces approached the Yalu River, Chinese troops entered the war, with 300,000 soldiers, catching the United Nations by surprise.
By 8 November, UN forces have been driven back considerably. But on this date, another unforeseen event occurred. Chinese and North Korean communist troops suddenly break off contact with United Nations forces and fight only rear-guard delaying actions as once again UN troops drive toward the Manchurian border. As United Nations troops continue to advance in other areas, much depends on what the huge Chinese army will do next.
On November 27th, Chinese forces recaptured the North Korean capital of Pyongyang. On November 27, 1950, Chinese forces surprised U.S. forces in the Chosin Reservoir area. 30,000 United Nations troops were encircled and attacked by about 120,000 Chinese troops. A brutal 17-day battle and freezing weather soon followed. The UN forces were able to break out of the encirclement and withdraw to the port of Hungnam. By the end of the withdrawal, the Chinese troops had advanced and retaken almost all of North Korean territories. On December 24, 1950, General MacArthur requested 34 atomic bombs from Washington to prevent further Chinese advances. His request was strongly declined and led to his later dismissal. Meanwhile, on the home front, Julius Rosenberg, a former engineer for the Army Signal Corps, was arrested on suspicion of espionage, accused of spying for the Soviet Union and providing them with top-secret information about American nuclear weapon designs. Later, his wife, Ethel Rosenberg, was also arrested. As the year drew to a close, the United States found itself deeply entangled in a multifaceted struggle against global communism, grappling with the ongoing war in Korea and confronting internal battles against treason amid the backdrop of the enduring Cold War. Coming up, 1951, the Chinese capture Seoul. The UN captures it back. Truman fires MacArthur, and the Rosenbergs are convicted. All that and more. Next time on The Cold War, Year by Year.